One of our greatest weapons against tyranny, if not our greatest weapon against tyranny, is our ability to remember, our memory. And that's why so much goes into flooding our memories with bullshit news stories and weather every fucking 10 minutes during the news broadcast. And of course, why even more goes into totally destroying our ability to remember with things like vaccines and fluoridated water. Oh, and let's not forget aluminum in most fucking deodorants. Fortunately, despite using a lot of deodorant in my youth, despite being vaccinated when I was a toddler and a baby, and despite smoking a ton of weed, I still have my memory for the most part. Or I at least still have the ability to remember some news that came out about 5 days ago. This news that the US was going to reveal a Saudi official who is tied to the 9/11 attacks. This news about Saudi Arabia, which has been totally buried and for the most part wiped from people's memories, thanks in part to the attack on a Saudi Arabian oil facility. And because it's been buried, I decided that it might be important for me to go ahead and make a video about it. So reading from the NBC News article titled, US declassifies key name in Saudi 9/11 suit, but won't release it publicly, it reads, the Trump administration decided Thursday to declassify a key name long sought by relatives of 9/11 victims, who are suing Saudi Arabia over allegations of that country's involvement, but declined to release the name publicly. Very shameful. The name of the individual, which the 9/11 families believe may support their allegations of Saudi involvement in the terror attacks, will be disclosed to the plaintiff's lawyers under a protective order. The order makes it illegal for those attorneys to release the name to the public, meaning the identity of the individual will remain a secret, at least for now. By the way, it's the identity of individuals. If you look more into this, there's more than one individual. So this article gets that wrong right there. It's not an individual, but I mean, I guess that goes with the anonymity or the secrecy of this, or of these people's names. The decision by the FBI and the Justice Department was a partial victory for the 9/11 families, who have been fighting in court to compel the Trump administration to hand over the name. Terry Strada, who chairs the group 9/11 Families and Survivors United for Justice Against Terrorism, called it a good result. The families are dedicated to getting to the truth, and we shouldn't have to beg for this sort of basic information or be kept in the dark about the Saudi role in the attacks, Strada said in a statement. Still, the administration did not declassify other documents the 9/11 families have sought as part of their lawsuit, although the FBI said more documents could be produced in the future. Yeah, okay. The FBI pointed out that the name of the individual had been the family's top priority, calling it, quote, the primary piece of information that the plaintiffs in the 9/11 litigation have been seeking, unquote. The Saudi embassy in Washington did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The White House, which earlier referred all questions about the matter to the Justice Department, also did not immediately respond to a request for comment. You know, I really fucking hate that shit. When they're like, oh yeah, they didn't immediately respond. Have they responded at all? Oh no, they haven't responded at all. See, now if you say that somebody didn't immediately respond to the questions or to requests for comment, it means that they eventually responded. So I don't understand why they... whatever. It's just something that annoys me. So anyway, you get the point. They declassified the name, but they put it under a protection order, which means it's basically still classified. And it's funny that they would do this the day after 9/11. So, I mean, the day after 9/11, so there's a whole bunch of other shit in the news. It's also a Thursday. Nobody really pays attention to the news on Thursday, although that's a stupid thing for me to say. But interestingly enough, about a week before this, there was this article in the New York Post titled, Robert Mueller helped Saudi Arabia cover up its role in 9/11 attacks. This was another suit. I believe this is the same lawsuit. Is that, you know, even Robert Mueller or members of the US government helped cover up 9/11 involvement. And technically, they still are. By not producing all of the information that's available in the Saudi involvement in 9/11, they're covering up Saudi Arabia involvement in 9/11. So they're still doing it. Robert Mueller did it back then, but it's still being done now. So this article is just interesting. It's a New York Post, as I said. I'll read a little bit from it. It says, after a lengthy investigation, Special Counsel Robert Mueller charged Russia See, this sentence doesn't make any sense. Okay, so after a lengthy investigation, Special Counsel Robert Mueller charged Russia with making multiple systemic efforts to interfere in our election, and said the incursion deserves the attention of every American. But former FBI investigators say their old boss didn't feel the same concern when they uncovered multiple systemic efforts by the Saudi government to assist the hijackers in the lead up to the 9/11 attacks, a far more consequential, to say nothing of deadly, foreign influence operation on America. So now this is just more evidence to prove that these people belong in prison and that this form of government, federalism, this centralized tyranny, does not work. Now before I finish this video, I just want to talk about how news headlines or trending headlines manage to hack our attention, manage to hack our memory. Like how the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks managed to make us forget that the day before, the Pentagon had been found to be missing about $2.3 trillion. Or like how this attack on the Saudi oil facility, from the news that there are Saudi officials linked to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And this news doesn't just hack our attention or hack our memory, it hacks the online algorithms and the search engines. So if you type into Google Saudi Arabia, in the top stories you're not going to find anything about the Saudi officials being named in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Instead, you're just going to find a whole bunch of articles related to this attack on their oil facility. And then if you type in Saudi Arabia 9/11 news, you actually find in the top stories, one, you find White House describes Saudi oil attacks as their 9/11, which is just absurd. Gas prices rise after Saudi Arabia oil site attacks. I don't know why that would be related to Saudi Arabia 9/11 news. And then you find 9/11 commission interview with Saudi Prince Bandar released, which again doesn't have much to do with the officials who were involved in the 9/11 attacks. And then, I mean, if you scroll down, you do find 9/11 attacks, U.S. to reveal key name and Saudi suit. You do find that. But, it says to reveal. It doesn't reveal it. But anyway, that's just me nitpicking. But this is interesting. When it says Team Trump, or even this other one that says White House describes, but Team Trump, Saudi sees this attack as their 9/11. Now, I find that to be very interesting. I find that to maybe have a sinister tone. Maybe it is their 9/11. Maybe it was an inside job. I know that the Houthi rebels have taken responsibility for it, but, all the world is a stage. They control all of the characters on the field. I'm sure that Saudi Arabia and other powers have their strings attached to the head of these Houthi rebels. So, it's kind of how, like, the CIA gives drugs to the drug dealers, and then the drug dealers put it on the streets, and then they get arrested. I mean, you wouldn't think that there's a connection there. Or how the United States funds terrorists that it then later on goes and attacks or uses to declare war. I'm sure that there's some connection between the powers that be and these Houthi rebels that appear to be fighting the powers that be. Once again, all the world is a stage. So I see this as, yes, maybe it is their 9/11 attack. And you know what? What's very interesting is, check this out. I tried looking for news about Saudi Arabia. I wanted to try to find what news was out there about Saudi Arabia before these attacks on September 12th. So I typed into Google Saudi Arabia news for September 12th, 2019. I wanted to see how much news was actually out there about these Saudi officials that are linked to 9/11 and their names being released. I wanted to see if there was a lot of news out there, a lot of headlines about that. I wanted to see if, how many people were likely to see it. And instead I came across this article entitled, Saudi Arabia says deeper OPEC cuts will be considered in December, calls for better compliance. So basically on September 12th, 2019, like a day or 2 days before their oil facility was attacked, they were talking about how they needed to make cuts in oil production to increase the price of oil. So, and all of this nonsense. So it amazes me that they want, Saudi Arabia and these other oil countries, and I'm sure other people, actually want oil prices to be higher. Especially Saudi Arabia, all of their money, or at least most of their money, comes from their oil wealth. So just a couple days before their oil facility was attacked, which ended up driving up oil prices, They were talking about the need to get oil prices higher and the need to cut oil production. So anyway, that's just some food for thought. I'm going to leave the rest for you guys to think about, meditate over, and I'll see you guys and girls in the next video.